What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a normal interview, only to be ambushed by a host who seems determined to tear him down on live television? In just 38 seconds of one specific comment, Savannah Guthrie would turn a simple promotional appearance into the most explosive moment in Today Show history. Samuel L. Jackson arrived at the studio that morning like he had done dozens of times before. He was there to talk about his new film, to share some stories, to connect with the audience watching from home. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The interview started normally enough. Samuel sat down on the couch, greeting Savannah with a smile. Hoda Kotb and Al Roker were also on set, sitting nearby, ready to jump into the conversation. The cameras were rolling, millions of people were watching, and everything seemed fine. Savannah opened with a question about the new movie. Samuel answered enthusiastically, talking about the character he played and what drew him to the role. He was animated, engaging, doing exactly what a guest is supposed to do. But then something shifted in Savannah's demeanor. Her smile became tighter. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You know, Samuel," she said, leaning forward, "a lot of people have been saying that you take on too many roles, that maybe you're not as selective as you used to be." The statement hung in the air. Samuel's expression changed. He straightened up in his seat. "I'm sorry, what?" he asked. His voice measured, but with an edge to it. Savannah didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down. "Well, you've been in what, like 100 movies in the last few years? Some critics say you're just showing up for a paycheck now. The quality doesn't matter anymore." Hoda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Al Roker looked down at his notes. The tension in the studio was immediate and thick. Samuel took a breath. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Let me stop you right there. I choose every single project I do with intention. I work because I love what I do, and I'm fortunate enough to be in demand. If you're suggesting that I'm just phoning it in, that's not only disrespectful, it's flat out wrong." Savannah waved her hand dismissively, actually waved it like she was brushing away his words. "Oh, come on. You have to admit that some of your recent choices have been, let's say, questionable." "Questionable?" Samuel repeated, his jaw tightening. "You want to tell me which of my choices you find questionable? Please, I'm really curious to hear this." The audience in the studio had gone completely silent. This wasn't playful banter. This was real tension, real conflict, happening live. Savannah pulled out a card, like she had prepared this ambush ahead of time. "Well, for example, you did that commercial for, what was it, a car insurance company? And then there was that video game voice work. I mean, these aren't exactly prestigious projects." Samuel's expression darkened. His voice dropped lower, which anyone who knows him understands is when he's truly angry. "So you're sitting here, on national television, telling me that the work I choose to do isn't good enough for you? You're judging my career, my choices?" Hoda finally tried to intervene, her voice nervous. "Maybe we should talk about the new film, the one that's coming out this weekend." But Savannah ignored her completely. She kept her focus locked on Samuel. "I'm just asking the questions that people want answered, Samuel. You're a public figure. You have to expect some scrutiny." "Scrutiny?" Samuel said, leaning forward now. "There's scrutiny, and then there's disrespect. What you're doing right now is disrespect. You invited me here to promote a film, and instead you're trying to tear me down." Savannah laughed, actually laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. If you can't handle a few tough questions, maybe you shouldn't do interviews." That was the moment. That laugh, that comment about being sensitive. The entire energy shifted. Samuel stood up from the couch, not quickly, not dramatically, but with purpose. He removed his microphone with steady hands. "You know what?" he said, his voice cutting through the studio. "I've been doing this for 40 years. I've sat through thousands of interviews. I've been asked tough questions, challenging questions, important questions. But what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's not even good television. It's just mean." Savannah's smile finally faltered. She seemed to realize, perhaps too late, that she had pushed too far. "Samuel, wait, let's just—" "No," he interrupted, his voice firm but controlled. "I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect me and my work. I came here in good faith. I showed up on time, ready to have a conversation, but you had a different agenda." Al Roker stood up, trying to defuse the situation. "Hey, let's all take a breath here. We can reset, start over." Samuel looked at Al, and his expression softened slightly. Al had always been kind to him in previous appearances. Al, I appreciate that. I really do. But this isn't about taking a breath. This is about respect. And right now, I don't feel respected. Hoda stood as well, her hands up in a peaceful gesture. Samuel, we value you being here. We really do. Samuel nodded at Hoda. I know you do, Hoda. I've always enjoyed talking with you. But your co-host here, he gestured toward Savannah without looking at her, decided to turn this into something else. Savannah finally seemed to grasp the gravity of what was happening. Her face flushed red. Look, if I offended you, that wasn't my intention. Samuel turned to face her fully. If you offended me, there's no if about it. You absolutely offended me. You questioned my integrity, my work ethic, my choices. You laughed at me when I tried to defend myself, and then you told me I was being too sensitive. The crew behind the cameras had stopped moving. Everyone was frozen, watching this unfold. You don't get to invite someone onto your show and then attack them. Samuel continued, That's not how this works. I've been nothing but professional. I've been respectful. And in return, you ambushed me. Savannah's voice got defensive, sharp. I was doing my job. Asking questions is literally what I'm paid to do. There's a difference between asking questions and being cruel, Samuel shot back. You crossed a line, and you know it. Hoda tried once more to salvage the situation. Why don't we all sit back down and we can talk about the movie? That's why we're all here, right? Samuel shook his head slowly. I appreciate you trying, Hoda. I really do. But I can't stay here. I won't stay here. I have too much respect for myself. He started walking toward the edge of the set. Savannah's voice called after him, now with a hint of panic. Samuel, you're really going to walk off? On live television? He stopped and turned back to face the cameras. Not Savannah, but the cameras. He spoke directly to the audience at home. To everyone watching, I'm sorry you had to see this. I came here excited to share something I'm proud of. But sometimes, you have to stand up for yourself. Sometimes you have to walk away from a situation that isn't right. I hope you understand. Al Roker stepped forward, his voice gentle. We understand, Sam. We completely understand. Samuel gave Al a small nod of acknowledgement, then looked at Hoda. Always a pleasure, Hoda. You too, Samuel. Always, she replied, her voice sad. He didn't look at Savannah again. He simply turned and walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The three hosts stood there. The camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. The audience sat in shocked silence. Finally, Savannah spoke, her voice shaky. Well, we need to go to commercial. But before they could cut away, Hoda turned to Savannah, and her voice was ice cold. What was that? What were you thinking? Savannah looked stunned. I was just asking questions. No, Hoda said firmly. That wasn't asking questions. That was an attack. He's right. You ambushed him. Al Roker nodded in agreement. That was way out of line, Savannah. Way out of line. Savannah's face crumpled. I thought I was being tough. I thought that's what people wanted. There's tough and there's cruel, Al said, repeating Samuel's words. What you did was cruel. The producers were frantically signaling to go to commercial. The control room was in chaos. But the cameras kept rolling for just a few more seconds, capturing Savannah's face as she realized what she had done. I messed up, she whispered. Yeah, Hoda said, you really did. Finally, mercifully, they cut to commercial. But the damage was done. In those few minutes, on live television, in front of millions of viewers, Samuel L. Jackson had stood up for himself against someone who thought she could tear him down. He had walked away with his dignity intact, while Savannah Guthrie sat there, exposed as someone who valued ratings over respect. The interview that was supposed to last 15 minutes had imploded in less than 10. What started as a routine promotional appearance had turned into a masterclass in standing up for yourself. Samuel had come to talk about art, about creativity, about storytelling. Instead, he ended up teaching a different kind of lesson entirely. Back in the studio, as makeup artists rushed to fix Savannah's tear-streaked face before they came back from commercial, Hoda and Al sat in silence. The energy had completely changed. What was supposed to be a fun, light morning show had turned dark. When they came back from commercial, Savannah's eyes were red. Her voice was quiet. We want to apologize for what you just saw. Things got heated, and that's not what we're about here today. But the words felt hollow. The audience had seen what happened. They had watched a respected actor be disrespected by someone who thought she was untouchable. They had seen him calmly, powerfully, walk away rather than engage in a fight he shouldn't have had to fight. Hoda took over, steering the show in a different direction. Let's talk about some good news happening around the country. She tried to smile, tried to bring back the warmth that morning shows are supposed to have, but it was impossible. The ghost of what had just happened hung over everything. Al Roker did a weather segment, pointing at maps and talking about temperatures, but his heart clearly wasn't in it. He kept glancing over at Savannah, who sat stiffly, barely participating. The rest of the show limped along. Guests who were scheduled to appear later reportedly saw what happened, and some reconsidered whether they wanted to sit on that same couch. The energy never recovered. How could it? What Savannah had failed to understand, what she learned too late, was that respect isn't optional. You can ask tough questions without being disrespectful. You can challenge someone without attacking them. You can do your job without forgetting basic human decency. Samuel L. Jackson had spent decades earning his reputation. He had worked his way up from small roles to becoming one of the most recognizable and respected actors in the world. He had done the work. He had paid his dues. And he wasn't about to sit there and let someone diminish that. The walk-off wasn't about ego. It wasn't about being unable to handle criticism. It was about drawing a line. It was about saying this far and no further. It was about recognizing when a situation has become toxic and having the strength to remove yourself from it. In that moment, Samuel became more than just an actor promoting a movie. He became an example. He showed millions of people watching that it's okay to stand up for yourself, that you don't have to accept mistreatment just because someone has a platform, that walking away can be the most powerful thing you do. Savannah, on the other hand, learned a very public lesson about what happens when you forget that the people you interview are human beings, not just content for your show. She learned that being a good interviewer isn't about gotcha moments or trying to create viral clips. It's about connection, about curiosity, about respect. The contrast between them couldn't have been clearer. Samuel, standing tall, speaking calmly but firmly, defending his choices and his dignity. Savannah, scrambling, defensive, realizing too late that she had miscalculated badly. Even in the way they each handled the confrontation, their characters showed through. Samuel never raised his voice. He never insulted Savannah personally. He simply stated facts and stood by his boundaries. He was the adult in the room, even though he was the one being attacked. Savannah, meanwhile, got defensive, dismissive, and then finally tried to downplay what she had done. Even her apology, when it came, was weak. "If I offended you," she had said, as if there was any question about it. The other hosts, Hoda and Al, found themselves in an impossible position. They were Savannah's colleagues, but they were also professionals who could see clearly that she was in the wrong. Their attempts to save the situation were admirable, but ultimately futile. Once Samuel made his decision to leave, nothing was going to change his mind. And why should it? Why should he have stayed in an environment where he was being treated poorly? Because it would make things easier for everyone else? Because walking away would be awkward? Those aren't good enough reasons. Samuel understood something that many people struggle with. You teach people how to treat you, and if you accept disrespect, you're telling them that it's okay. By walking away, Samuel sent a clear message, not just to Savannah, but to everyone watching. Your dignity matters. Your self-respect matters. And no job, no interview, no opportunity is worth sacrificing those things. The studio audience, who had been silent during the confrontation, reportedly gave Samuel a standing ovation as he left the building. They understood what they had witnessed. They had seen someone stand up for themselves with grace and strength. Inside the studio, the mood remained somber for the rest of the show. Producers were on their phones, dealing with the fallout. Social media was exploding with reactions. But on set, there was just a heavy, uncomfortable silence, punctuated by forced cheerfulness. Savannah went through the motions for the rest of the broadcast, but anyone watching could see she was shaken. She had thought she was in control. She had thought she could push buttons and create drama, and it would all be fine. She was wrong. Hoda and Al did their best to maintain professionalism, but there was no hiding what had happened. The chemistry between the hosts, which is so crucial for a morning show, had been fractured. How do you sit next to someone after watching them be cruel to a guest? How do you pretend everything is fine when it clearly isn't? The interview, or rather the implosion of the interview, became the story. Not the movie Samuel was there to promote, not the other segments that aired that day, just those few minutes of television where everything went wrong. And it went wrong because Savannah made a choice. She chose to attack instead of engage. She chose to be provocative instead of thoughtful. She chose her own agenda over the respect she owed her guest. And when Samuel called her out on it, she doubled down instead of backing off. Every step of the way, she made the wrong choice, and every step of the way, Samuel made the right one. He tried to answer her initial criticism respectfully. When she persisted, he became more firm. When she laughed at him, he stood up. And when it became clear that the situation wasn't going to improve, he left. It was a progression that made sense. He didn't storm off at the first sign of trouble. He gave her chances to course correct. But she didn't take them. She kept pushing until she pushed him right off the set. The irony is that Savannah probably thought she was creating good television. Controversy gets attention, right? Conflict makes people watch. But there's a difference between interesting television and cruel television. There's a difference between a spirited debate and a one-sided attack. What she created wasn't compelling. It was uncomfortable. It was painful to watch. And ultimately, it made her look bad. Not Samuel. Because here's the thing about respect. It's not complicated. You don't need special training or advanced degrees to understand it. You just need basic human empathy. You need to treat people the way you would want to be treated. Savannah forgot that, or maybe she never learned it in the first place. Samuel, on the other hand, demonstrated that you can be strong without being loud. You can stand up for yourself without being aggressive. You can draw boundaries without being cruel. He was firm but fair, angry but controlled, hurt but dignified. That's the kind of person people respect. That's the kind of person people want to work with. That's the kind of person who gets invited back, not because they're easy or compliant, but because they're professional and principled. As the show finally wrapped up that day, the crew reportedly avoided eye contact with Savannah. The easy camaraderie that usually exists on a morning show set was gone. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone knew who was at fault. Hoda was said to have gone straight to her dressing room without speaking to anyone. Al did the same. The usual post-show chatter, the decompression, the laughter, none of it happened. Instead, there was just an awkward dispersal, everyone eager to get away. Savannah sat on the couch for a long time after the camera stopped rolling. Maybe she was replaying the interview in her head. Maybe she was trying to figure out how it had all gone so wrong so quickly. Maybe she was just in shock. Whatever she was thinking, one thing was certain. She had started the day as the host of a major morning show, in control and confident. She ended it as the person who drove Samuel L. Jackson off the set, exposed on live television as someone who valued confrontation over conversation. The contrast with Samuel couldn't be more stark. He had started the day as a guest, there to do a favor by promoting his movie on their show. He ended it as a hero to millions of people who saw him stand up for himself. He had walked in as an actor. He walked out as an example. The power dynamic had completely flipped. Savannah thought she held all the cards. She was the host. It was her show, her turf. But Samuel showed that real power doesn't come from a title or a desk. It comes from integrity. It comes from knowing your worth. It comes from being willing to walk away when a situation becomes unacceptable. And that's the lesson, really. That's what people would remember long after the specific words were forgotten. Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Today Show not because he couldn't handle the heat, but because he refused to be disrespected. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching that they don't have to accept mistreatment either. You can stand up, you can speak out, you can leave. And when you do it with the kind of dignity and clarity that Samuel showed, you don't lose anything. You gain everything. Your self-respect, your integrity, your power. Savannah Guthrie learned that day that being a host doesn't give you the right to be cruel, that having a platform doesn't mean you can abuse it, that viewers will see through attempts to create drama at someone else's expense. She had tried to make Samuel look bad. Instead, she made herself look terrible. She had tried to create a viral moment. Instead, she created a cautionary tale. She had tried to assert dominance. Instead, she revealed weakness. Because only weak people punch down. Only insecure people try to diminish others. Only someone lacking in real power needs to disrespect their guests to feel important. Samuel didn't need to do any of that. He just needed to be himself, confident but not arrogant, strong but not aggressive, clear about his boundaries without being inflexible. He showed what real strength looks like, and it was beautiful to watch. That's what made the moment so powerful. Not the conflict itself, but the way Samuel handled it. With grace, with dignity, with absolute clarity about who he is and what he will and won't accept. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His career speaks for itself. His body of work is undeniable. But in that moment, he proved something anyway. He proved that success doesn't mean you have to accept disrespect, that being professional doesn't mean being a doormat, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away.